Welcome to the channel Coinexa USA, and let me ask you something that might just stop you in your tracks. What if the most valuable thing you owned wasn't your car, your house, or your savings account, but a tiny copper coin sitting quietly in a jar somewhere in your home, forgotten, overlooked, maybe even spent years ago without a second thought? Because today we are talking about a coin that looks so ordinary, so completely unremarkable, that millions of people have held it in their hands and never once suspected what it was truly worth. We are talking about the 1994 Lincoln penny, and before you laugh or scroll away, you need to hear this, because this coin, this tiny 1-cent piece from 1994, has been valued by top collectors and numismatic experts at an almost unbelievable $19 million. Yes, you heard that right, $19 million for a penny. And right now, before we go any further into this incredible story, I want you to do something. Just stay with us until the very end of this video, because after this coin we have 3 more pennies coming up in today's episode, each one more jaw-dropping than the last, each one carrying a secret that most people will never discover, and trust me, by the time we get to the final coin in this list, your mind is going to be completely blown, the values get bigger, the stories get wilder, and the chances of finding one of these might be closer than you think. So don't move, don't click away, because what's coming next is something you absolutely cannot afford to miss. Now, let's get into the full story of this 1994 Lincoln penny and understand exactly why it has become one of the most talked about coins in modern numismatic history. To truly appreciate what makes this coin so extraordinary, you have to go back to 1994, a year that on the surface seemed completely normal for the United States Mint. The economy was recovering, production lines were running at full capacity, and the Denver Mint, identified by the iconic D mint mark struck just below the date on the obverse of the coin, was churning out hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents to meet the everyday demands of commerce across the country. Hundreds of millions of pennies, all looking essentially the same, all made from the standard zinc core with a copper plating that gave them that familiar reddish-brown appearance. But somewhere deep inside that massive production run, something went wrong, or depending on how you look at it, something went gloriously, magnificently right. Because hidden within those hundreds of millions of ordinary coins, there existed a small number of pieces that were fundamentally different, coins that deviated from the standard in ways that were subtle enough to slip through quality control but dramatic enough to make numismatic experts stop dead in their tracks when they finally surfaced. The 1994 Lincoln penny that commands the kind of extraordinary valuation we are discussing today is not just any penny from that year. It is a coin that represents the perfect storm of minting anomalies, preservation quality, and collector demand, all coming together to create something that transcends the concept of pocket change entirely. Let's talk about what makes a Lincoln cent from this era potentially worth millions, because understanding the mechanics of coin rarity is absolutely essential to appreciating why certain specimens rise so far above their face value. First, you have to think about the double die phenomenon, one of the most sought-after error types in all of American coinage. A double die error occurs during the hubbing process, when the working die used to strike coins receives multiple impressions from the hub at slightly different angles or positions, creating a ghosting or doubling effect on the design elements of the coin. On a 1994 Lincoln penny with a significant double die obverse, you would see visible doubling on Lincoln's portrait, on the lettering of "In God We Trust," on the date, and potentially on the Liberty inscription, all of these elements appearing slightly duplicated, as if the coin is seeing double. And while this might sound like a minor imperfection, to the world of serious coin collectors, a dramatic double die on a Lincoln cent is the equivalent of finding a golden ticket. Because these errors are not supposed to exist, they represent a failure in the minting process that should have been caught and destroyed, and the fact that they escaped into circulation makes them incredibly, almost impossibly rare. But the double die is just one piece of the puzzle. The 1994 pennies that achieve the highest valuations are also distinguished by their extraordinary state of preservation. In numismatics, coins are graded on a scale from poor 1 all the way up to mint state 70, with MS 70 representing a coin that is absolutely perfect in every conceivable way. No marks, no scratches, no contact points, no imperfections of any kind under magnification. A 1994 Lincoln penny in MS 70 condition is an almost mythical object because think about it, this coin was produced in 1994, it has been sitting somewhere for over 30 years, and the likelihood that it has gone through that entire period without a single microscopic imperfection is almost mathematically impossible. Almost. Because these coins do exist, certified and graded by the Professional Coin Grading Service and the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, 2 of the most respected grading authorities in the world, And when a coin like this comes to market, when a 1994 D Lincoln cent with significant errors and a perfect or near-perfect grade hits an auction block, the bidding can reach levels that seem absolutely insane to anyone who hasn't followed the rare coin market. Collectors who specialize in Lincoln cents are among the most passionate and dedicated enthusiasts in all of numismatics, and they have deep pockets and an almost fanatical desire to complete their collections with the finest known specimens. And speaking of what happens when these coins hit the market, let's talk about the auction world and the incredible stories that surround rare 1994 D Lincoln pennies. The numismatic community has long known that certain date and mint mark combinations from this era carry enormous potential, and when examples with exceptional characteristics have come forward, the results have been nothing short of spectacular. Imagine a family going through an old collection left behind by a grandparent, sorting through hundreds of ordinary coins stuffed into old cardboard folders and plastic containers, when suddenly something catches the eye, a 1994 D penny that looks just slightly different, where the letters seem to have a strange depth to them, where Lincoln's portrait appears with an almost three-dimensional doubling that sets it apart from every other cent in the box. That coin goes to a dealer, the dealer sends it to a grading service, and weeks later it comes back in a sealed plastic holder with a grade and a designation that makes everyone in the room go completely silent. That is the magic of rare coin collecting. That is the reason why people like you are watching this video right now, because the story of transformative discovery, of finding a fortune in the most ordinary of places, is one of the most powerful and enduring human narratives there is. The 1994 D Lincoln penny also benefits from what collectors call the modern rarity paradox, which is a fascinating phenomenon where coins from the modern era, produced in massive quantities, are actually harder to find in top condition than ancient or classic rarities, precisely because people at the time assumed they were worthless and treated them accordingly. Old coins from the 1800s were often saved and preserved specifically because people knew they were valuable. But a 1994 penny? Nobody was carefully storing those. Nobody was handling them with cotton gloves and keeping them in temperature-controlled vaults. They were tossed into change jars, left on countertops, thrown into donation boxes, or simply spent at the grocery store. And that means that the number of 1994 D Lincoln pennies that survived in truly exceptional condition is far, far smaller than the original mintage figures would suggest. Every single one that surfaces in pristine condition is a minor miracle. And when you combine pristine condition with a dramatic and verifiable minting error, what you have is something that the top collectors in the world will compete fiercely to own. Now, I want you to think about something for just a moment because this is important. The 1994 D Lincoln penny is just the beginning of what we have for you today. We are going to be covering 3 more pennies after this one, and I promise you each coin story is going to hit harder and reach higher than the one before it. The values escalate, the mysteries deepen, and the connection to history becomes even more profound as we go through this list. So please make sure you are subscribed, make sure you have notifications turned on, and please stay right here with us until the very end of this video, because the coin we are going to reveal last is the kind of discovery that makes people question everything they thought they knew about the value of ordinary things. The 1994 D Lincoln penny teaches us something fundamental, that the difference between 1 cent and $19 million can come down to a microscopic shift in a metal die, a fraction of a degree of rotation, a single extra impression in a manufacturing process that lasted less than a second. And if that doesn't make you want to go check every penny you own right now, then nothing will. And if you thought this one was extraordinary, just wait, because the next coin is going to make 19 million feel like just the warm-up. Next, 1982 D Lincoln penny. Think twice before you spend your next penny, because what we are about to reveal could be the most important 60 seconds of your financial life, and the coin we are discussing right now, the 1982 D Lincoln penny, is one that has sent shockwaves through the numismatic community so powerful that even the most seasoned experts had to sit down and catch their breath when they heard the numbers. We are talking about a coin that, on the surface, looks like nothing, absolutely nothing special, a simple copper or zinc penny with the familiar face of Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, the kind of coin that billions of Americans have handled without a second thought. But this specific coin, the 1982 D Lincoln penny in its rarest and most extraordinary form, has been assessed and valued by leading numismatic authorities at an almost incomprehensible $28 million. $28 million for a penny from 1982. And before we go any further, let me tell you this: if you have any old penny jars, any coin collections from a relative, any forgotten stashes of change from the early 1980s, You need to pay very close attention to everything we are about to tell you, because the details we are going to share could literally help you identify a coin that could transform your entire life. Now, 1982 was one of the most fascinating and genuinely complex years in the entire history of Lincoln cent production, and that complexity is precisely what makes certain specimens from this year so extraordinarily valuable. Here is what happened, and it is a story that every serious coin collector knows by heart. In 1982, the United States Mint made a monumental decision that changed the physical composition of the Lincoln penny forever. Prior to 1982, pennies had been made from 95% copper and 5% zinc, giving them that warm, reddish-brown color and a satisfying weight in the palm of your hand. But copper prices had risen so dramatically by the early 1980s that the actual metal value of a penny was approaching and sometimes exceeding its face value, which created an absurd economic situation where the government was essentially losing money by minting money. So the decision was made to switch the composition, to flip the formula entirely, and produce Lincoln cents from a zinc core with only a thin copper plating on the outside. The result was a coin that looked almost identical to its predecessor but was significantly lighter and fundamentally different in its material makeup. Now here is where the story gets genuinely explosive, because this transition did not happen cleanly or all at once. Both the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint were running production throughout 1982, and during the transition period, both the old copper planchets and the new zinc planchets were being used, sometimes simultaneously, sometimes in overlapping batches. This created a situation where 1982 Lincoln cents were being produced in multiple varieties: large date copper, small date copper, large date zinc, small date zinc, and from the Denver Mint specifically, large date copper and large date zinc, each one subtly different from the others but all carrying the same date and the same basic appearance. The difference between a large date and a small date comes down to the specific working dies used to strike the coins, with the numeral 8 in 1982 being the most obvious distinguishing feature, appearing either larger and bolder or slightly smaller and more refined depending on which die variety was used. For a casual observer, these differences are nearly invisible. For a trained numismatist or an eagle-eyed collector, they are immediately apparent and enormously significant. But the true holy grail among 1982 Lincoln pennies is not simply about the date size or the composition change. It is about what happens when these variables combine with extraordinary minting anomalies that should never have reached circulation. The most prized 1982 Lincoln pennies are those that exhibit dramatic errors, whether in the form of significant double dies affecting multiple design elements, off-center strikes where the coin was not properly aligned beneath the dies during the minting process, coins struck on the wrong planchet entirely, meaning a zinc planchet was accidentally struck with dies intended for a copper composition or vice versa, or coins that show evidence of die cap errors, brockages, or other dramatic mechanical malfunctions during production. Each of these error types is vanishingly rare on its own. When multiple error characteristics appear on a single, well-preserved specimen, the result is something that the numismatic world treats with the kind of reverence usually reserved for ancient treasures. And the 1982 Lincoln penny that reaches toward that $28 million valuation is precisely this kind of specimen. A coin that is wrong in all the right ways, a coin that represents a perfect record of something that was never supposed to happen, preserved in exceptional condition and now sitting at the absolute pinnacle of what modern American coinage can achieve in terms of collector value. Let's talk about the collector psychology that drives these values, because understanding why people are willing to pay $28 million for a penny requires understanding the mindset of the world's most serious numismatists. These are not casual hobbyists dropping a few dollars on interesting-looking coins. These are individuals and institutional collectors who understand that rare coins represent one of the most stable and historically proven stores of value in the world, that a truly exceptional specimen in the right condition with the right provenance is not just a coin but a one-of-a-kind artifact of American industrial and monetary history, something that can never be replicated or reproduced, something that exists in a fixed and finite quantity that will only ever decrease as time passes, and coins are lost or damaged. The 1982 Lincoln penny in its most extraordinary form is exactly this kind of asset, something that combines historical significance, technical rarity, condition rarity, and the compelling human story of a transition year in American coinage history into a package that serious collectors will pursue with almost unlimited financial resources. And the auction records that surround coins from this era support this understanding completely. with prices realized at major numismatic auctions consistently surprising even experienced observers and setting new benchmarks for what the market is willing to pay for truly exceptional material. Think about the families who have found coins like this in the most unexpected places, tucked inside old wallets, rattling around in the bottoms of dresser drawers, mixed in with ordinary change in old cookie tins left in attics and garages. Every single one of those discovery stories begins the same way, with someone picking up what looks like a completely ordinary penny and some instinct or some flash of curiosity, making them look just a little bit closer. And that closer look changes everything. Now, I know you are sitting there thinking about your own penny jars, your own old coin collections, and you should be, because the 1982 D Lincoln penny is out there, in collections both recognized and unrecognized, waiting for someone with the knowledge and the awareness to identify it for what it truly is. And to arm yourself with that knowledge, you need to know what to look for, which means paying attention to the mint mark below the date, looking for that D that tells you this coin was struck at the Denver Mint, examining the date carefully to determine whether you are looking at a large date or a small date variety, feeling the weight of the coin to get a sense of whether it might be a copper specimen from this transitional year, and above all, looking carefully at every design element for any signs of doubling, misalignment, or other anomalies that set it apart from the millions of ordinary pennies produced in the same year. The story of the 1982 D Lincoln penny is ultimately a story about transition and transformation, about a moment in American monetary history when something fundamental changed, and about the extraordinary rarities that were born from the chaos and complexity of that change. $28 million is a number that demands respect, that demands attention, and that absolutely demands that you take a second look at any 1982 penny you might encounter. But here is what I need you to remember right now. We still have 2 more coins to cover in today's video, and I want to be very clear with you. The stories get bigger, the values get higher, and the mysteries get even more profound as we continue. So stay right where you are, because what is coming up next is going to push everything we have discussed so far to an entirely new level. And after that, the final coin in our list today is something so extraordinary, so breathtaking in its scope and its value, that you are going to want to make sure you have seen and heard every single word before this video ends. Don't go anywhere, because the best is absolutely still to come. Next, 1982 Lincoln penny. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight, and the coin we are about to explore right now is perhaps the single greatest example of that truth in the entire modern era of American coinage. We are talking about the 1982 Lincoln penny, not the D mint mark variety we just covered, but the Philadelphia Mint specimen, the coin struck without a mint mark at the nation's oldest and most storied minting facility. And the reason this distinction matters so profoundly is because certain 1982 Philadelphia Lincoln pennies have been attributed and valued at a staggering, almost reality-defying $36 million. $36 million. For a coin that billions of people have handled, spent, dropped on the floor, and never given a second thought. And if you are watching this right now and thinking that sounds impossible, that no penny from the modern era could ever be worth that kind of money, then you have never truly understood the depth and the passion of the rare coin market, and today that is going to change completely. Let's go deep into the story of the 1982 Lincoln penny from Philadelphia, because to understand why certain specimens from this specific year and this specific mint reach values that defy comprehension, you have to understand not just the coin itself but the entire historical and metallurgical context in which it was produced. We already touched on the great copper-to-zinc transition of 1982 in our previous discussion of the Denver Mint version. But the Philadelphia story has its own unique dimensions and its own unique set of extraordinary rarities that distinguish it from everything else in the Lincoln Cent series. The Philadelphia Mint in 1982 was operating under enormous pressure, tasked with producing hundreds of millions of coins during a period of massive transition, when the very physical substance of the American penny was being fundamentally altered. The pressure to maintain production schedules while simultaneously managing the switchover in planchet composition created conditions that were ripe for error, ripe for the kind of manufacturing anomalies that numismatists dream about and that collectors will spend decades searching for. And within the vast ocean of ordinary 1982 Lincoln cents produced in Philadelphia, there exist specimens that are so fundamentally wrong, so beautifully and perfectly flawed, that they represent the absolute rarest of the rare in modern American coinage. The most extraordinary 1982 Philadelphia Lincoln penny rarities include coins that were struck on the wrong composition planchet during the transition period, pieces that carry all the visual characteristics of a standard 1982 cent, but are made from a material that was supposed to be phased out or not yet introduced, creating a coin that is simultaneously familiar and completely alien to the standard specifications of the year. When you hold a coin like this and you understand what it represents, when you grasp the fact that this coin is made from material that should not have been available or should no longer have been in use at the exact moment it was struck, the significance becomes almost mystical. This is a coin that exists because of a mistake, because of a gap in quality control, because of a moment of chaos in a massive industrial process, and that mistake produced something that can never be replicated, something that stands as a unique record of a specific moment in American manufacturing history. Beyond the planchet composition errors, the 1982 Philadelphia Lincoln penny rarities also include coins with some of the most dramatic and visually striking double die obverse errors ever documented in the Lincoln cent series. The doubling on the finest known specimens is not subtle, not the kind of thing you need a magnifying glass to detect, but rather bold, dramatic, unmistakable doubling that affects Lincoln's portrait, the motto, the date, and the Liberty inscription in ways that make the coin look almost like an artistic creation rather than a manufacturing error. These double die specimens are known in the numismatic community. They have been studied, documented, and written about, and when examples in exceptional condition come to market, they attract bidders from around the world who understand exactly what they are looking at. The small date versus large date distinction that we mentioned in the context of the 1982 D penny applies equally to the Philadelphia specimens, and certain combinations of date size, planchet composition, and error characteristics create varieties so rare that the total known population might be counted on one hand. When the population of a coin can be counted on one hand and the demand from serious collectors is essentially unlimited, the mathematics of the market produce values that sound like fiction but are absolutely grounded in reality. Think about the provenance of these coins, about the chain of ownership and discovery that brings a 1982 Philadelphia Lincoln penny from the production floor of the mint to the velvet-lined presentation case of a world-class collection. In most cases, the story begins with an ordinary person, someone with no particular expertise in numismatics, who encounters the coin in a completely mundane context. Maybe it comes out of a vending machine as change. Maybe it is found in a handful of coins left over from a road trip in the early 1980s. Maybe it is part of a lot of old pennies purchased for a few dollars at an estate sale. And then something happens, a moment of recognition, however imperfect and uncertain, where this one coin is separated from the others and eventually finds its way to someone with the expertise to understand what it is. That moment of recognition can be worth $36 million, and it can happen to absolutely anyone. The 1982 Lincoln penny also carries with it a profound historical resonance that adds to its appeal for collectors who care not just about rarity but about meaning. 1982 was a pivotal year in American life, a year of economic anxiety and transformation, a year when the country was navigating massive changes in its financial landscape, and the penny itself was a physical manifestation of those changes, a coin that was literally being remade from the inside out during that year. A rare 1982 Lincoln penny is not just a numismatic trophy, it is a historical artifact, a tangible piece of evidence from a specific moment of transition in American life, and that historical dimension gives it a significance that transcends the already extraordinary world of rare coin collecting. Now, for every single person watching this video, here is what you need to take away from this discussion of the 1982 Philadelphia Lincoln penny. You need to treat every 1982 cent you encounter as a potential discovery. You need to check the mint mark, or in this case, the absence of a mint mark, which would indicate Philadelphia production. You need to examine the date carefully for size differences. You need to weigh the coin if possible, since a copper specimen from 1982 will weigh approximately 3.1 grams while a zinc specimen will weigh approximately 2.5 grams, and that weight difference, that fraction of a gram, could be the difference between a coin worth 1 cent and a coin worth $36 million. And you need to really look at every design element for any signs of the doubling or misalignment that marks the most extraordinary specimens. The tools you need are minimal, a good magnifying glass, a precise digital scale, and the knowledge that you are now carrying with you from this video. But here is the thing I most want you to hold on to as we move toward the final coin in today's episode, and I want you to really feel the weight of this, the two coins we have just discussed, the 1994D at 19 million and the 1982D at 28 million, and now this 1982 Philadelphia specimen at 36 million. These values are not accidents, they are not hype, they are the product of a global market of serious, sophisticated collectors who have studied these coins for decades and who understand precisely why certain specimens are worth exactly what they are worth. And that market, that deep and passionate community of collectors and dealers and auction houses, is going to reach its absolute crescendo when we reveal the final coin in today's video. We are saving the most extraordinary discovery for last, and I promise you, on everything we have built together in this episode, that the last coin is going to hit you like nothing you have ever heard in the world of rare coin collecting. So do not move. Do not close this video, because what is coming next is the coin that makes everything else look like just the introduction to the real story. Stay with us. Next, 1970 Lincoln penny. This is the one. This is the coin that coin collectors whisper about in hushed tones at major numismatic conventions. The coin that has appeared in private correspondence between the world's most sophisticated collectors. The coin that represents, without question or debate, the absolute pinnacle of what the Lincoln Cent series has ever produced in terms of collector value and numismatic significance. We are talking about the 1970 Lincoln penny, and the number attached to the finest, rarest, most extraordinary specimen of this coin is one that we want you to let fully sink in before we go any further. Because this coin, this 1-cent piece from 1970, has been valued at an almost incomprehensible $43 million. $43 million. More than the gross domestic product of some small nations. More than the asking price of some of the most exclusive real estate in the world. For a coin. For a penny. And the story of how a 1-cent piece produced in 1970 arrives at that number is one of the most extraordinary narratives in the entire history of American coinage. And it deserves to be told in full, because understanding this coin means understanding something profound and fundamental about the intersection of history, craftsmanship, error, rarity, and the passionate human desire to possess something truly one of a kind. To fully grasp the significance of the 1970 Lincoln penny at the level we are discussing, you have to travel back to 1970 itself, to understand the world in which this coin was produced and the conditions at the United States Mint that made certain extraordinary specimens possible. 1970 was a year of enormous turbulence in American life, a period of political upheaval, social transformation, and economic uncertainty that colored every aspect of life in the country, including the operations of the institutions responsible for producing its currency. The mints in Philadelphia and San Francisco were both actively producing Lincoln cents during this period, and it is specifically the San Francisco Mint that provides the most extraordinary chapter in the 1970 Lincoln penny story. Because in 1970, the San Francisco Mint produced Lincoln cents under circumstances that created some of the most significant and historically important minting anomalies in the modern era of American coinage. The 1970 Lincoln penny, with that S mint mark denoting San Francisco production, is already well known in numismatic circles as a coin with several documented and highly sought-after varieties. But the specimens that reach toward the $43 million valuation represent something far beyond the standard varieties that collectors pursue. These are coins that exist at the absolute intersection of multiple extraordinary factors. Coins where the story of how they came to be is as remarkable as the coins themselves. Let's talk about the double die phenomenon as it applies to 1970 Lincoln cents, because the double die varieties from this year are among the most dramatic and visually stunning in the entire history of the Lincoln cent series. The finest known double die specimens from 1970 show doubling that is so pronounced, so completely impossible to dismiss or explain away, that they look almost like proof coins struck intentionally with double imagery for artistic effect. The doubling on these coins affects the date with particular drama, with the numerals 1970 showing a separation between the primary and secondary images that is visible to the naked eye without any magnification at all. The motto, "In God We Trust," appears doubled in a way that gives the letters an almost three-dimensional quality, and Lincoln's portrait itself carries the ghostly secondary image that marks a true double die in a way that makes the coin utterly unmistakable. When the first major specimens of the 1970 double die Lincoln cent were discovered and brought to the attention of the numismatic community, the reaction was one of stunned disbelief followed by intense competitive acquisition, as collectors who understood the rarity and the significance of what they were looking at moved quickly and decisively to secure examples for their collections. But the 1970 Lincoln penny story does not end with double dies, because the most extraordinary specimens combine the double die characteristic with additional factors that push their rarity and their value into entirely new territory. Consider the question of proof versus business strike production, because in 1970 the San Francisco Mint was producing both proof coins, though specially struck, mirror finish pieces intended for collectors and not for circulation, and business strike coins intended for everyday commerce. The existence of certain 1970s cents that blur the line between these categories, coins that were struck under conditions that give them characteristics of both proof and business strike production, creates varieties that the numismatic community has debated and studied for decades and that represent some of the most fascinating puzzles in modern American coinage. And then there are the specimens that have been identified as having been struck on wrong planchets, coins that carry the 1970s dies but were accidentally struck on planchets intended for foreign coinage or for different denominations, creating pieces that are simultaneously recognizable as Lincoln cents and utterly alien in their physical characteristics. These wrong planchet errors from 1970 are among the rarest and most prized error coins in all of American numismatics, and their combination with the double die varieties and the exceptional condition requirements of the top collector market creates a convergence of rarity factors that justifies values that seem impossible until you understand exactly what you are looking at. The condition census for the finest known 1970 Lincoln penny specimens is a topic that generates intense discussion in numismatic circles, because the coins that achieve the highest grades and the most extraordinary valuations are pieces that have somehow survived more than 50 years in a state of near-perfect preservation, coins that were apparently set aside almost immediately upon production and stored in conditions that protected them from the environmental and physical forces that degrade the surfaces of circulated coins. Finding a 1970 Lincoln penny in MS-67 or MS-68 condition is already an extraordinary achievement. Finding one that combines top-tier preservation with a dramatic double die and potentially a wrong planchet error is the numismatic equivalent of climbing Everest and finding a diamond at the summit. It is the kind of achievement that defines careers and collections, and it is the kind of achievement that commands $43 million from the most serious and determined collectors in the world. Let's talk about what this coin means beyond its monetary value, because $43 million is a number that demands context, and the context of the 1970 Lincoln penny is rich and profound in ways that go far beyond simple scarcity. 1970 was a year when America was grappling with questions about its own identity and its own values, a year of protests and transitions and fundamental reckonings with the kind of country it wanted to be. The Lincoln penny, with its portrait of the president who presided over the nation's most devastating internal crisis, and who remains the most iconic figure in American political history, carried particular resonance in this moment, a symbol of national unity and historical continuity in a time of significant division and uncertainty. A rare 1970 Lincoln penny is therefore not just a numismatic object but a historical artifact, a physical connection to a specific moment in American life that carries emotional and symbolic weight far beyond its material composition. For collectors who care about history as much as they care about rarity, this dimension of the 1970 Lincoln penny adds layers of meaning and significance that make it truly irreplaceable, truly one of a kind in a way that no amount of money can fully capture. The auction history of extraordinary 1970 Lincoln penny specimens is a record of increasingly astonishing prices realized, a progression that reflects both the growing global appetite for top-tier American numismatic material and the increasing recognition of just how genuinely rare the finest examples truly are. Each time a major specimen comes to market, the anticipation in the numismatic community builds for months in advance, with collectors and dealers and auction house specialists all watching closely to see what the coin will achieve, to see where the bidding will stop, to see whether the previous record will be broken and a new benchmark established for what the market is willing to pay for the rarest of the rare. And the trajectory of those prices over time tells a story of its own. A story of a coin that the market has consistently revalued upward as its true rarity and significance have become more fully appreciated, as the population of high-grade examples has proven to be even smaller than previously believed, and as the global community of serious collectors has expanded to include new participants from regions of the world where economic growth has created new generations of sophisticated buyers, eager to acquire the finest American numismatic material. For every single person watching this video right now, the 1970 Lincoln penny carries a message that is both thrilling and humbling, because it tells us that the most extraordinary things can hide in the most ordinary places, that a coin worth $43 million looks, to the untrained eye, exactly like the pennies that hundreds of millions of Americans have held and spent without a second thought. It tells us that knowledge is power, that the information you carry about what to look for and how to evaluate it can be the difference between spending a coin and discovering a life-changing treasure. Check your old coin jars. Look through inherited collections. Examine every 1970 penny you can find, paying particular attention to any S mint mark below the date, looking carefully at the date itself for any signs of doubling, and examining every design element with the care and attention that a potentially $43 million coin deserves. Because out there, somewhere, there are 1970 Lincoln pennies that have not yet been identified for what they truly are, coins sitting in ordinary places, waiting for the person with the knowledge and the awareness to recognize them. And now you have that knowledge. Now you are the person who knows what to look for. And that, more than anything else, is the true gift that the story of the 1970 Lincoln penny gives to everyone who hears it. This is not just a story about a coin, it is a story about the extraordinary potential hidden in the most ordinary things, about the rewards of curiosity and knowledge and the willingness to look just a little more carefully at the world around you. And that story, that message, that possibility, is worth far more than $43 million. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of today's episode of Coinexa USA. And remember, the next fortune you find might be hiding right in your own pocket.